Back again with another Frank Turek Q&A, which this time reveals why Frank is wrong, and I think knows he's wrong, or at least he should. But honesty doesn't seem to be high on the priority list for the religious apologist. So go for it, Frank. There is no evidence for Christianity. Show us that there is. These short Q&A videos are really a goldmine for the anti-theist because Frank doesn't have time to couch his absurdity in comforting platitudes and long, rambling rationalizations. They're short and sweet, and Frank has to rely on the goodwill he hopes that he's cultivated with his audience to get him through. So they're a mix of practiced apologetics and attempts at humor, and they often just prove that Frank has no clue what he's doing, which is no surprise. So why do Christian churches fail to present evidence for Christianity? Maybe because there is none. But you won't ever get Frank to admit that, will you?
Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Gideon, and I'm from South Korea.
Oh,
international student.
Welcome from South Korea. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So it's like I've been a Christian all my life, and it's been like 2 years that I've been in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to ask is, what made you to think that those reasons support that Christianity is truth? Because no one told me that like you did during the lecture. Because I went to the church every day in Korea, but I was confused. Like everyone said, yeah, that's true. Jesus born and he saved our life.
Mm-hmm.
But my faith was not good. Like when I had really hard time. Like I'm just asking that.
All right, that's actually a pretty good question. But not for the reasons that I figure Frank is going to try to spin it as. So this guy, and I didn't catch his name, wants to know why churches don't teach the evidence for Christianity, and that's because there is no evidence for Christianity. People like Frank claim there is evidence, they like to pretend there is evidence, but when it comes right down to it, when it's time to expose the supposed evidence to critical scrutiny and skepticism, there is no evidence. None at all. It's all rationalization, empty claims, wishful thinking, and crazy delusion. It's logical fallacies masquerading as evidence. It's astounding leaps of illogic that fail the rational smell test every single time. The religious are blatantly guilty of this, and it doesn't matter how many times these failings are pointed out to them, the religious don't care. And Frank is a massive offender. So, let's see how he handles this question.
Well, what you're expressing is probably the sentiment of a lot of people, because unfortunately this kind of material isn't often spoken of in church. And why isn't it spoken of in church? Because the seminaries are so far behind. The seminaries who teach the pastors are teaching pastors to preach to a generation that existed 50 years ago, when you can open the Bible and people would go, oh, the Bible, I guess I got to agree with the Bible.
Which was dumb then, and it's still dumb today. This is why faith is so idiotic. People need to recognize that no position should be accepted as valid until they have personally verified it to be so and checked it out critically and rationally. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a scientist to understand science or a doctor to understand medicine, but you do have to be able to examine all sides of various claims and see where the evidence stacks up, learn to recognize fallacious logic and reject it as irrational. But most of all, to be able to think critically and non-emotionally regardless of the subject matter. And that can be hard, I understand, when you're dying of a terminal disease and some woo-meister comes along and promises you a cure in exchange for all of your money. Yes, you might be desperate to survive, but that doesn't make the claim any better, and you'd just be throwing your money and your very limited time away on a pipe dream, which is just stupid. Feelings don't change the facts. Facts are facts regardless of your feelings. And the idea of believing the Bible because it's the Bible, that's just dumb. You should only believe the Bible if the Bible is objectively and independently proven to be true. And sorry, it just isn't.
Today, it's completely against that. So the seminaries are just now catching up to teach pastors that they've got to teach apologetics. That's what this is, evidence that it's true.
Except there is no actual evidence, as I said. You have people like Frank who present bald rationalizations, empty claims, false ideas, and wishful thinking as evidence, but none of that qualifies. Now, in the introduction to one of his books, Bart Ehrman writes that seminaries know that the Bible isn't true, or at least words to that effect, and that preachers come out of seminary understanding a lot of the problems within the Bible and with Christianity, problems that they will never speak of again because their job isn't evaluating the Bible. It's convincing people that the Bible is true. They aren't being paid to tell the truth. They're being paid to be a cheerleader for Christianity. And that's why the Clergy Project exists, which is a group of preachers who have realized that the things in the Bible are nonsense, that Christianity is wrong, but who are stuck in their current job without being able to tell anyone else the truth. They have a particular skill set that limits their other job prospects, so these poor people are stuck having to lie to people for a paycheck. I am willing to bet that there are more atheist preachers out there than anyone wants to admit to. And these people can't tell the truth and keep their jobs.
So people who have questions can get them answered before they're going to believe what the Bible says. So you're not alone. I mean, this is true in America too. Very few people, very few pastors, there are exceptions, but very few pastors actually teach it's true. And look, what I do, I shouldn't even be necessary.
You're not. The Frank Tureks and the William Lane Craigs and the Andy Bannisters of the world aren't necessary if people actually cared about the facts and not about the feelings. But because that's not the case, we have religious shysters like Frank, whose job it is to comfort the religiously gullible, to feed them a line about their belief being true, to massage reality so that it looks like their faith is well-founded, when none of that is actually the case. Frank and his ilk are being paid to lie for the Lord, a Lord that probably isn't even real. As I've said before, follow the money. Once you realize how they're getting paid and what they're getting paid for, you'll understand the motivations of their actions.
I shouldn't even, I mean, I know pastors are busy, they got so much to do, but if pastors were teaching 1 Peter 3:15, always ready to give an answer and a reason for the hope that you have, if they were equipping their congregations, parachurch ministries like ours wouldn't even be necessary.
Well, they wouldn't be necessary if there was any actual evidence for the things that you profess to believe. Because if there was evidence, you could just present it. You wouldn't have to have these absurd stage shows meant to convince people that you had it. You could just hand it to them. And that's why scientists don't get up on stage and try to convince people that science has it right. Because science has evidence and doesn't need to convince anyone. The rational people will look at the evidence and be convinced. The irrational people don't matter. But that's not how Christianity works. It isn't how any religion works. That's why you need the prolonged stage show and the song and dance aimed at emotion, not intellect. Because intellect has no place in religious beliefs. Frank could just say, here's the evidence. Christianity is demonstrably true. Good night, and don't forget to try the veal. But that's not how this works, is it?
So, now there's a lot more detail in the book, obviously. We just kind of gave you an overview here. So if you want to go deeper, just get a book. Yes, sir.
Your lecture.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, go buy my book because I'm really in this for the money. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to him making money. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist after all. But Frank's business model, like all con men and drug dealers, is to get the potential mark hooked for free, or nearly for free, and then jack up the price when they have no choice. Let me whet your appetite. Then I'll try to sell you stuff. Now, again, I'm fine with that, but it's important to point out exactly what's going on and why it's happening. Frank isn't being virtuous for God. Frank is a businessman preaching to the choir so that he can pay his bills. Frank has no actual evidence to present because, as I said, if there was evidence, the debate would be over and Christianity would have won. But that's not the case. Christianity is losing because, as Frank pointed out, modern society isn't going to blindly believe the Bible just because it's the Bible. They require more, and the religious simply have nothing to present. So Frank and people on his side, having no actual evidence to present, no actual logical arguments, no actual credible positions, have to make something up. They have to play the emotion card and hope that people don't think about it too much. And largely, that's worked for hundreds of years because the religions teach people not to think. Today, not so much. And that's a good thing because Frank and his cronies are dishonest, even if they don't know it. But after reading people like Bart Ehrman and talking to a lot of former pastors, I'm finding it hard to believe that they don't know, that they weren't taught all of the problems in their theology, and they're simply choosing not to acknowledge it because it gets in the way of their paycheck. I could be wrong, but I really don't think that I am. So anyway, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks again, Frank. You screwed it up.
Bum